Inflation is cooling, yields are falling, and rate cut talk is back. We're also sharing 9 of Louie's top A-rated stocks. Welcome back to Navellier Market Buzz. The CPI is running at a 2.4% annual pace, and Treasury yields are falling. President Trump just talked about 15% GDP growth. Dad, is that realistic?
Well, that's an interesting subject, So Friday night I was at Mar-a-Lago for dinner, and Howard Lutnick was there. So me and Howard had a little chat about that because, I predicted 5% on Fox Business back in December. And Maria was very kind to keep repeating my prediction. And then Howard upped me by going to 6%. And then in an interview with Larry Kudlow on Fox Business, President Trump called for 15. And I assumed he was talking about 15% for his entire second term. And when I went to watch that interview, he wasn't talking about that. He's talking about 15% growth in a quarter. So I had an interesting conversation with Howard. Howard's sticking to 6%. The only way you can get to 15% is with massive productivity gains. Ed Yardeni pointed out how important productivity gains are. There's a perception that Kevin Warsh, our new Fed chairman, is going to be paying attention to those productivity gains. But it's possible if we had, 7-8% productivity gains, and then we had 4 to 5% gains from the trade deficit disappearing from booming exports of energy and gold and pharma and all the other things we export, and then some consumer spending, maybe 3% from consumers. It's possible you could get to 15 briefly, but it would have to be something extraordinary. But, President Trump is a salesman, and he set a very, very high bar. And, if we can meet it, it will be a big deal.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio received a standing ovation at the Munich Security Conference. Did this help reset U.S.-EU relations?
Yeah, it should. Marco Rubio, that speech was obviously the best of his career. It was extremely well written. It talked about all the historic ties between Europe and America and all the values we share. It talked about how the U.S. grew. We grew with certain demographic groups from Europe. And he even talked about how as the Germans moved to the Midwest, our beer got better. It was a very, very beautiful speech. But then in the end, he said, we don't agree on everything, but we should be tied by our Western values. The Wall Street Journal basically came to the conclusion that it is a marriage of convenience between us and Europe. Biggest ally we have in Europe is now Italian Prime Minister Meloni. She's pushing for better relations. But the truth is, at this conference a year ago, J.D. Vance came off as a bit caustic, and they were reeling from that. Obviously, we had Davos in Switzerland, where everybody was upset at President Trump for wanting to buy Greenland from Denmark. And so they're still kind of reeling. But there's also a lot of infighting in the EU. France and Germany are fighting. French President Macron thinks Trump's trying to break up the EU. And I'll be honest with you, the EU is supposed to be a monetary and trade union, and it's become a political nightmare because it tries to influence local elections and elections in other countries. That's not its job. Its job is to be a monetary and trade union. And it's interesting, Poland's a very good ally of the U.S., and Poland's one of the fastest growing countries in the EU. They were very, very respectful of Marco Rubio, but they did stick to their net zero pledge that Europe's trying to implement. And the irony is, they burn coal in Poland. I don't know if you remember when we were at the docks in Poland, all the coal piled up. It was just mountains of coal. I would be shocked if Poland went to net zero because they're known as one of the bigger coal burners in Europe. So and that helps their economy because their electricity is cheaper. It was interesting to see the comments, but Marco Rubio is incredibly polished and very charming fellow. He also took some shots at the UN because he says the UN hasn't prevented wars, and the U.S. is actively trying to prevent wars. And so I think it helped, but I think Europe has their own issues. And a lot of times when you have a political problem at home, you have to get a external bogeyman. And President Trump is that bogeyman that Europe can blame for for their problems, which are self-inflicted.
So how much are bond yields actually falling?
Quite a bit. Basically, back on February 4th, the 10-year Treasury yielded over 4.28%. Today, it yields under 4.04%. So a 24 basis point fall, almost a quarter percentage points in Treasury bond yields is a big drop. And it was largely due to that very good CPI report. The annual pace of the CPI went from 2.7% to 2.4%. Now, this week we have the PCE coming out, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index. That's the Fed's favorite inflation indicator. And we'll see what that cools to. But obviously the favorable inflation news is raising speculation that the Fed may be cutting rates sooner than later. Obviously, we're in a transition to a new Fed chairman, but everybody's expecting a rate cut no later than the May FOMC meeting when Kevin Warsh takes over.
Now, before we get into some of your favorite A-rated stocks, I want to clear up some subscriber questions. Before you were saying, back up the truck, load up on Palantir, but it's now rated a C in StockGrader. Can you explain to our viewers what's going on?
Sure. So at the end of February, we will do a test of our quantitative and fundamental models. And that test will show how deep we can data dive. Do we have to be in the top 10%, 25, 40% of our models? And our fundamental models are beating our quant models. And our quant models are fine. They work good. It's just the fundamental models are better. And Palantir's fundamentals are outstanding. So, yeah, I'm going to stick with it. I own a lot of C-rated stocks when they have great fundamentals. So I'm not worried about it at all. Nvidia was a C for a while, and then it moved back up to a B. So I think you'll find that as soon as Palantir bounces, it will move right back up.
And right now it has a fundamental grade of A, right?
Correct, which is coveted. Very few stocks have that.
And now let's talk about SoFi. What are your expectations for them?
Well, this company has a very popular lending platform. It's used throughout Asia and in other countries, and they beat by a penny this last quarter. I've just noticed one little analyst trim on them, very minor. They went from 13 cents to 12 cents in the last 7 days. And although this company has a good surprise history, the last quarter was one of its smaller surprises, but it's still impressive, 8.7%. So this one is not strong enough for me to really get on. When I do third-party lenders, I tend to be predominantly in America. This one's more international. It's okay. It'll probably continue to appreciate. It's just not quite strong enough for me right now. It's a good time to remind everybody there's 1,200 A-rated stocks. I've only bought 77 of them.
We've gotten a lot of questions about Intel. Can you share with everyone what your opinions are on them?
Sure. Intel has rebounded, but it has a lot of issues. And I should be very clear on what went wrong with Intel. The first thing that went wrong with Intel is it wasn't run by an engineer. And they lost their lucrative chips processors that used to be in all the laptops to Taiwan Semi. The chips that are in the Microsoft laptop, the Apple computers, all come from Taiwan Semi. Furthermore, they did that deal with the Biden administration to open a plant in Ohio, and it didn't get built because the Defense Department reneged on their commitment to buy $2.5 billion a year in chips. So President Trump noticed the U.S. government gave Intel some money and they didn't do anything with it, so he demanded equity, and the stock did rally on that news. But, and he also called Jensen over at Nvidia to say, hey, can you help Intel? Hopefully Nvidia and Intel are doing some sort of collaboration, and Nvidia will help them. But it really has lost its mojo, and it's been in the doghouse for a long, long time. And it is surprising with its earnings in the last couple of quarters, but it's a recovering stock, and it's probably going to end up like Texas Instrument, making all kinds of low margin chips. I don't see it returning to its former glory.
Another subscriber wanted to know what your thoughts are on SanDisk.
Well, SanDisk is a super strong stock. The analyst earnings revisions are massive in this stock. It just posted a 75% earnings surprise. The guidance is excellent. Yeah, this one's really taking off. I have nothing but good things to say about SanDisk. Is it in my portfolios yet? Not quite. I do have Micron Technology, and I do have Seagate Technology, but SanDisk might be next. I'll have to find a window to buy it, but it is an outstanding stock right now.
And last subscriber question, what are your thoughts on Coherent Corporation?
It's pretty good. They just had a nice beat. They beat analyst estimates by 7%, and their sales are good. The analysts are revising their estimates steadily higher, and they are supposed to announce 52.4% earnings growth next quarter. So yeah, this one's up and coming. It's on my radar. Is it strong enough for me to buy it? It's just under my median earnings for the stocks I recommend, but it warrants my attention, so I'll be keeping my eye on it. And if it gets more positive analyst revisions, I definitely could add it.
Now let's end on what everyone has been asking and wanting. We're nearing the end of earnings season with Nvidia reporting on February 25th. What are your favorite A-rated stocks right now?
My favorite A-rated stocks right now are Barrick Gold, that symbol is B. That's a recent addition, one of that several weeks. Kinross Gold, GC, remains one of my safest gold stocks. Very strong forecast of sales and earnings. I love Seagate Technology, STX. I would buy that on any dip. Micron Technology, explosive sales and earnings. Just announced they're going to invest another $200 million to build out their memory chip business. And Micron makes these really fast memory chips that are in demand now for the data centers. Memory has historically not been a very sexy business, but everybody wants the fast RAM chips, for lack of a better word. CIEN is a networking company that's doing incredibly well. It's a smaller cap one, but it's been very explosive here. That stock is a phenomenal one in any pullback. SLT is the Israeli defense stock, Elbit Systems, and they have big contracts with some of the U.S. big defense firms. They're involved in missile shields and things like that. And as the U.S. has positioned itself around Iran, because there might be some action. Right now, the negotiations seem to be going okay, so there may not be an attack. But in the event there's going to be an attack, you have to install a missile shield around the U.S. facilities. But that's what ESLT is all about. That's Elbit Systems. That's a great stock, our best defense stock. Another stock we still really like is Bloom Energy, BE. These make the natural gas fuel cells. So this is what Oracle's trying to do and Brookfield's trying to do in their new data centers. You can get a direct natural gas pipeline. And it's perceived that Bloom Energy's natural gas fuel cells are more efficient than the turbines. Nonetheless, I do like GE Vernova, which sells natural gas turbines, and they have a big order backlog. Now, that stock is a little more volatile than some of the other data-related center stocks, so I would only buy GE Vernova on a pullback. And then finally, Quanta Services, PWR, looks awfully strong and benefiting from the data center expansion. And so all these stocks I just mentioned are great buys on pullbacks, and I would wait for that before you buy them. I wouldn't chase them.
Well, with inflation, growth expectations, global politics, and earnings, there's plenty to watch. Thank you all joining us for this midweek update. Please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already, but we'll see you this Sunday for a new video.